Welcome back to the class on international business communication. We were talking about groups and teams earlier. We will continue with the same topic in this lecture also. So, since we have a lot to cover, let's go straight to the revision portion and then we will continue with what we were talking about in the previous class. Some revision, please discuss amongst yourselves regarding the perception about membership in groups and its impact on group and team performance and effectiveness for team activities and for the organization as a whole. It seems like a lot of work, but all I want you to do is figure out, see, the whole concept of membership is a perception. It's what I feel about my membership in the group. It's what other team members feel about my membership in the group. It's what the group as a whole feels about the membership status of different people in different positions within the group. So that is what we were talking about in the previous class, and that is what I would like you to discuss amongst yourselves before we move on to the next portion. So that is what I mean by perception about membership in groups. I also want you to find out or discuss amongst yourselves what its impact is on the group and team performance. Groups and teams get together for a purpose. Groups and teams get together and do something. That is why they get together. They may get together just to share information, as we had spoken about last time. We have personal groups, we have functional groups. Now personal groups get together to share information, to support each other, but there is definitely a purpose, even if the purpose is enjoyment and sharing of knowledge and information. So in that case also, please discuss amongst yourselves how these perceptions of memberships impact the performance of these groups. I'll give you one very close to life example. These lectures that we are recording on the video are virtual teams. We are hoping that one person or several people in a class will watch this and maybe learn something or get some food for thought. This is different from a team in a class or a group in a class. It would be different if I were talking about these things to my colleagues. If I was telling them what I knew about communication, that would be different from the way I would teach my students, and this is a completely different group. It could be one-on-one. One of you might decide to just look up some of these lectures. You may not even listen to the full lecture. Some people may just decide to use these lectures for teaching in class, and that would become a different group altogether. Now again, what you see my position in the group will be different from what you see yourselves in the group, from how you view yourselves in the group, from how the facilitator of this interaction, if there is one, would view his or her position. If the person is merely helping you, say a teacher's assistant is helping you go through these lectures and pausing at the right places and facilitating the discussions, when I say please discuss amongst yourselves, that would be one. If the teacher is teaching you, they may decide to take portions that they feel I have dealt with more or less comfortably, and they may decide to show you those. And at times you might just decide to see these lectures on your own. So again, how you view your membership in the group is going to affect your team performance, your performance on how what your stakes are in this group. Similarly, in other groups also, how you view things, what your stakes are, what you're ultimately hoping to achieve will be decided by what happens, how you feel about your membership in the group. And we had talked about how people feel about their membership status in a group depending on who is leading the group, who is deciding on the direction of the group, who is giving the group a sense of purpose, how rules are being followed. We had 4 different kinds of groups that were discussed by Alcorn in that book, and those groups were, if you remember, they were homogenized, institutionalized, autocratic and intentional groups. So, depending on how you feel about where you belong and how you fit into the group, you will decide how to communicate with your team members, and all that will be affected by by the communication going on between the group members. I also want you to discuss amongst yourselves before we move on. I want you to figure out the connection between communication and group development. How are groups developed? What kind of stage at what stage, what is the communication going to be like. I want you to discuss the connection between communication and team building. I want you to discuss how communication impacts conformity to group norms and activities. So these are the things I would like you to discuss amongst yourselves before we move on to the next part of this lecture. Okay, norms that foster competent group interaction. We were talking about norms last time. So now this is a table that is given by that has been suggested by Nancy Buerkle-Rothfuss in this book on communication competencies and contexts. The author is Nancy Buerkle-Rothfuss. This book was published in 1985. And there's a table that I thought I should share with you. So I don't know if the camera can be zoomed on to the date, but if it can be, then please do so. Otherwise, I'm sure people who are viewing it, published in 1985 by Newbery Award Records Incorporated. Anyway, so this is the table. I have tried to reproduce this table on the slide so you can see it. Okay, norms. The norms here are, say one of the norms is attending to process. You need to attend to process. Whatever is going on needs to be paid attention to. The communication behavior that will be exhibited will be attending to or commenting on the group's method, and COMM here will be it is going to be used in this presentation as an abbreviation for communication for lack of space. Wherever there is lack of space, it will be used. Here I could have written the whole word, but anyway, the relevant roles of people enforcing this norm would be the manager, or the manager could be encouraging people, or maybe at times enforcing this role. The manager could also be commenting on the group's method and communication. And the basic communication competency category in this activity, or in enforcing this norm, or ensuring that everybody follows this norm, is controlling. So the manager will attempt to control the enforcement of this norm by attending to or commenting on the group's method and communication. The second norm is accepting feelings. Now these are the norms that foster competent group interaction, which means they encourage interaction, good interaction, appropriate interaction within the group. The second norm here is accepting feelings. Maybe the group encourages you to accept feelings. The communication behavior that will be expected of the members will be owning feelings and acknowledging others' feelings also. The relevant roles here would be those of the encourager and negotiator. So one person encourages people to express their feelings, another person negotiates when somebody expresses their feelings out of turn or is going overboard. They bring them back to the equilibrium. The basic communication competency category would be expression, either expression of just this is basically to encourage the shy people to start talking about themselves. It is also to encourage and to encourage respect of other people's expression. So the whole focus is on expression here, and anyone who's competent in expressing will be able to follow this norm better than others. Okay, or follow this norm better than others. Okay, next one here is adapting to feedback. That is another norm here. What this means is the communication behavior that will be through which this norm will be expressed or followed will be checking for perceptions and seeking feedback. So you check your own perceptions, you check the other people's perceptions also, find out what others are saying and seek feedback for your own perceptions. Again, the relevant roles that will help with this will be that of a negotiator and information. Info stands for information, again for lack of space, information manager. Basic communication competency category here would be symbolizing, processing and adapting. So you will need to be able to express your perceptions, you'll need to check your perceptions against those of others. There will need to be some symbolizing, some drawing parallels, processing of information coming from from the external environment and adapting based on the feedback that you receive from the environment. And again, so the roles that will be played will be those of a negotiator and an information manager. Okay. The other norm that fosters competent group interaction is objectively diagnosing problems. So how do you do this? We want members to do this. The behavior through which this will be expressed will be coordination of information. You have lots of information. How do you categorize it? How do you manage it? Systematically analyzing problems. So first you analyze the information and reach a consensus or come to a conclusion about what the real problem is. Then you analyze the problem, you break it into parts and figure out what needs to be attacked when. And then the basic communication competency category here is again symbolizing. You need to be able to think outside the box and try and fit into categories, come up with categories that will be as inclusive as possible of the issues or aspects that you want to put into, or the information that you want to put in that category. There will be processing. Once you've symbolized, you've come up with an idea of which category you're going to put the information into, then you need to process the information about whatever you need to look at all the information you have, and then you need to process it and put it into the right category. No category will be the right fit for any piece, so you have to decide which category things need to go into. And then you need to control things. You need to control the management of this information. Now the relevant roles that will be played here will be those of an analyst and a negotiator. You need to be able to analyze, you need to be able to negotiate the information, and so this is another one. The last one that is mentioned in this table is sharing responsibility, which is again expected of the team members or group members also. How do you do this? You participate verbally and non-verbally. You acknowledge the responsibility for the group. You're not standing there by yourself. You're part of a group. Group is one unit. So you acknowledge the responsibility for the group as part of the group. Again, the competencies that would be required would be pretty much everything we've talked about till now. Symbolizing, processing, adapting, controlling and expressing. You need to have all of these competencies in order to share responsibility, because you could be wearing any hat at any time. You could be a manager, you could be an analyst, you could be a negotiator, you could be an information manager, you could be any one of those. So, and the encourager also. So that is how these roles are played out, and the categories, the communication behaviors that you would be expected to play would be the ones in the communication behaviors that you would be expected to be competent in are listed in the last column. So this is, and you would need to be a gatekeeper, which means that when you share the responsibility, you don't let things get out of hand, you also don't underperform. So that is what is meant here. Now these are some of the norms that encourage group interaction. I thought I would share these with you because they are very relevant in helping us understand how group norms and team norms and communication are related, and what we need to do in order to become competent communicators. Okay, some roles and relationships within teams. Again, this is I have tried to reproduce a diagram. I'll show you where this is from. This diagram is from a book by Gamble and Gamble, 2002, Communication Work, 7th edition. Okay, so this is the book I am referring to. I tried to reproduce this diagram. I have a CD, but somehow just couldn't get the diagram from the CD, so I decided to try to reproduce it on the slide. These are the diagrams. They are patterns of communication that take place in an organization, and I thought this was very relevant for what we are discussing here. That's okay, you don't need to zoom on the book, I have it up here. So I've tried to reproduce it. I just hope I have done a reasonable job. I've made a small mistake here, and I am going to fix that right now. Okay, that's done, and we get back to full screen. Okay, great. We have, there are many types of networks There are many kinds, many channels, many diagrams that have been proposed by various researchers over the years as to the flow of information. But to limit the scope of this class, I'll share three of the most important ones with you. One is the chain or line kind of network, where information travels from person A to person B, person B to person C to person D to person E. So it's a linear transmission of information. The second kind of network here is the wheel or star, where everybody is sending the information to one person. So if you look at the differences between chain and line and wheel, you'll see that in wheel, one person is responsible for collection of all the information and in turn dissemination of the information to different people. In the first one, the information is coming going from point A to point B, from point B to point C to point D, and point D to point E. So if a person wants to send information to E, the person has to follow the chain of command. Okay, in a circle what happens, in a Y pattern what happens is, there is the, say E is the top manager, D is the middle manager, C is the frontline manager. So the frontline workers A and B send their information, report to or connect with C, and then C connects with D, D connects with E. If A and B want to talk to each other, there are other patterns where A and B can talk to each other, but if in this kind of pattern, if A and B want to talk to each other, they have to go through C. C puts A and B in touch with each other. C is also the liaison between A and D and A and E. And again, the information from C onwards, it is a linear kind of pattern. Then in a circle, again, A goes to B, B goes to C, C goes to D, D goes to E. I'm sorry, I don't have the dots there. I tried, but I just couldn't come up with the hubs, or I couldn't demonstrate the hubs here. Anyway, information goes from point A to point B, person says something to someone. It's almost like you must have played Chinese whisper. So it's like that. So information goes from point A to point B, B goes to C, C goes to D, D goes to E, and E comes back to A. Now I'll give you an example of this from real life. What happens is, we don't know who people know. Maybe you are the frontline worker, the customer service representative is helping a customer, and so let's assume that the customer service representative is person A. They have some problem. Person A does not, either is not able to complete the order to the satisfaction of customer. Hold on, no, I'm sorry, I'm confused. Anyway, let's say E is the customer, A is the CEO, and so there is initially no connection between the or maybe E could be the CEO, that's fine. A is the customer, B is the customer service representative, C is the manager, D is the senior executive, E is the CEO. If we take it that way, then B and A have an interaction which is not to the satisfaction of either of them, and A just keeps quiet. A doesn't tell B what is going on. B talks to C that this didn't happen properly, C talks to D, D talks to E, and E happens to know A. So E checks with A and says, did this happen, did this fall apart, and the circle again starts. So I hope this is the right example here. I'm sorry, I'm sort of little freezing up here. Anyway, we have an all channel kind of communication network where everybody talks to everybody, everybody is in touch with everybody, and that is how things happen. Now what happens is, the last part of this portion, this slide shows you how liaisons and bridges develop. We have cliques. Now cliques, again I am going to read out these things from the book. The next slide here gives you the definitions. I cannot show you the diagram and the definitions in one shot. So I am going to read out from the slide. When you're going through this, I'll pause on the next slide for a second. When you're broadcasting this lecture or viewing this lecture, please pause the slide and read things yourself. Clique is the setup or a network where people know, majority of the contacts know each other, and so this is a clique. The pentagon here, everybody knows everybody, everybody is in touch with everybody. Liaisons are not members of any one group or clique, but link persons in one group with persons in another group. So liaison is the person in the middle. Liaison connects one clique to another clique. They don't belong to either place, but they are very good friends with both of these groups. And the bridges and the liaisons feel more strongly integrated in both of these groups because they have very good connections with both of these groups. They are more team oriented because they have to keep these two people bonded. They are less frustrated with the group's work because they are on the inside, but they are still outside the group. The bridges, on the other hand, are persons in groups who have a predominant number of intra-group contacts and who also communicate with one or more persons in another group or clique. This is the best. So this is one of the best situations. You know, liaisons and bridges are good to, I mean, it can be stressful also, but this seems to be the most open, most social kind of role that people play in the communication networks. Bridges again have the feelings of membership similar to liaisons. I am a part of one group. I also am in very good touch, or where I have a good solid connection with another person who is an integral member of the other group. So it's like having a foot in both the groups. And they are more team oriented, they are less frustrated with the group, because if their relationship with one group doesn't work out, they can go through their bridge into the other group. Isolates are people who have little, if any, contact with others, and that's why two isolates have been put here. One isolate is somewhat familiar with one group, the other isolate is somewhat familiar with the other group, but they are not really connected. They don't feel well integrated into the life of the group, they fail to contribute to group functions, they feel less secure in their life concepts, and they are more likely to experience dissatisfaction. Again, this knowledge, this information is from what I just showed you in this book by Gamble and Gamble. The definitions have been taken from this book and they are here. So you can pause for a second here. I have just read out from this slide. Okay, you can pause, we should move on. Excuse me. Maintenance communication is another aspect of network communication where messages and behaviors are used to preserve an acceptable and lasting relational state. Maintenance communication really excuse me. Maintenance communication really takes place between all these connections. You know, you have the connections in the Pentagon with each other. All these connections are preserved because of maintenance communication, or how we maintain the communication within each of these networks. Okay, maintenance communication may be personal, on a personal level, it's informal and friendly. It could be contractual, you scratch my back and I scratch yours, live up to expectations, fulfill role requirements, you have a task related tool talk, you get things done, teams disband and we move on. It could also be regulative or strategic and sometimes manipulative, where you get things done by hook or crook, sort of, you know, persuade people and maintain the relationship. It could be a carrot and stick approach at times, it could be termed as that. It could also be direct, where you just lay all your cards out on the table and let people move on from there and maintain their communicative, maintain their interactions in a more direct manner. You discuss your satisfaction with the communication rules in a situation and take things from there. Okay. Minimizing power differences. Now, when we talk about relationships, I'm sorry, I should have had an introductory slide here. When we talk about interpersonal relationships at work, one of the communicative activities that takes place in maintenance communication at work is minimization of power differences between superiors and subordinates. And I think we should come to these slides when we discuss, yeah, it should be after the superior subordinate communication, so I'll just come back to it. Some communication activities that happen between superiors and subordinates. We have different kinds of relationships at work. We have peer and co-worker relationships, we have superior and subordinate relationships, and some communication activities are, one is building of trust or expression of trust. And how do we encourage this? Not guilty unless proved otherwise, which means that one way in which the superior can develop trust in the subordinate is by communicating that the subordinate is not guilty, has not done anything wrong, is not making mistakes, unless the subordinate gives a reason to the superior to believe otherwise. Shared vulnerability is another one, where the superior and subordinate come on the same level and feel equally vulnerable. The superior says, I am following the rules, if I don't follow the rules, I will get slammed and so will you. The next here is some level of dependence, which means I depend on you. Unless you give me your share of the work, I cannot function properly. And if you do give me your share of the work, I'll give you positive feedback and both of us will grow and both of us will be equally responsible to the senior. So, you know, I depend on you, you depend on me. I cannot move further till you do your share of work and give it to me. You are my right hand or whatever, or left hand if you're left-handed. Anyway. So, that is the shared level of dependence. Behavioral consistency. If the superior is consistent with his or her behavior with the subordinate, in his or her behavior with the subordinate will have a start developing a level of trust with the superior. If the superior is predictable to some extent, especially when it comes to positive and negative positive and negative feedback reinforcements, at that point of time the subordinate starts developing the trust in the superior. Behavioral integrity, again, what the superior says to the subordinate and what the superior does should be coherent. The superior says we should follow ethical practices. Again, I can give you examples from academics. Superior says we need to stop plagiarizing. We need to put an end to plagiarism. We'll train our students in plagiarism. And on the sly, the superior copies and pastes information and takes the data generated by his or her student and passes and uses that data in a paper and passes that paper off as his or her own work, will be a theft of academic property or intellectual property, and that is not really considered appropriate. So, that is really something we all should be careful about, and that will be discussed in one of the lectures later. Sharing and delegating of control is another activity that the superior can engage in order to gain trust of the subordinate. Frequent and open communication, leave doors open, not always, but then have enough channels open with your subordinate so that the subordinate can talk to you whenever necessary. And demonstration of genuine concern. I mean, don't say that I am concerned, but actually be concerned about your subordinates, and the subordinates will start having faith in you, and that will lead to enhanced loyalty, enhanced commitment to the organization. That will in turn lead to a benefit to the organization. The organization will become more efficient and you will end up earning tons more money than you would if your employees weren't very loyal. Okay. Immediacy is another one, another activity. Immediacy, that is any communication that indicates interpersonal warmth and closeness. So, you value the job of the subordinate, be attentive to the subordinate, express confidence in the subordinate's abilities, show personal interest in the subordinate's work and welfare. I am not saying personal life, but if the subordinate falls sick, be genuinely concerned. Don't just show up at the hospital because you have to, but be genuinely concerned. Express verbal appreciation. People won't know how you feel till you tell them how you feel. So, it's very important to tell. People can't get into your head and figure out that you're really appreciating their work. You need to tell them that you appreciate their work, give them positive feedback. Negative feedback we all give. but positive feedback is essentially is equally important and should be given to the subordinates, and they'll start feeling close to you, they'll start feeling bonded. If you go through the stages of relationship building at work, this is the stage at which the bonding takes place, and that aids in effectiveness of the organization. It helps with the performance of the team and ultimately the organization. Okay. Demonstration of a willingness to assist the subordinate. Now, this is again very, very important. What happens is that when we are working together, bosses feel after a point, they say, okay, you're all professors, you know your work. There's always a possibility to learn more. You know, you reach a certain stage in life and superiors say, you've been hired because you know your job. Yes, I know my job, but it'll help to get some feedback from somebody who has been through the same stage and who has achieved a higher status, or who has achieved a higher position after being through the same state. So, getting some feedback on our work always helps. And learning, you know, if I'm making mistakes, please tell me and please support me. Don't ask me to go and find answers on my own. Please support me in learning newer things, and that helps if the boss is supportive. If the boss helps you with your mistake, says you've made a mistake and then gives you or helps you find solutions, it always helps with bonding with the boss. So that includes, or that necessitates, supportive communication between the superior and the subordinate. Okay, immediacy, feedback. Providing feedback and seeking feedback are both very important to come close. Compliance gaining is another thing. We have various styles of compliance. We will discuss these when we talk about compliance and persuasion in the next class. We won't go into it right now. Compliance just means why should people, when we say compliance, we are essentially talking about why should people listen to you. Why should they talk to you? Why should they even believe what you're saying? Why should they agree to doing what you ask them to do? And that is essentially compliance. We will talk about it when we talk about persuasion. Okay, some communication activities here, subordinate to senior. Again, before we do this, I'm sorry, I made a mistake with the slides here. So, superior to subordinate, we have various communication activities. How do you minimize power differences in order to enhance the trust and immediacy with the subordinate? One of the ways in which you can minimize power differences is, or one of the tactics that people use to minimize power differences is value congruence. You say my value system is similar to yours. The other one is non-routine problem solving. We think out of the box, we get together and we don't necessarily follow we follow the rules in principle, but then we come up with alternate, more creative ways of solving problems. Inside markers, things that you do within your organization, special ways of doing things within an organization. For example, I'll just tell you, this is something that has become picked up, caught on. It had been happening in private organizations for a long time. Now what has happened is that in autonomous organizations like ours, it's very common practice to send internal information as FYI. I don't hesitate if I'm sending information to my boss. If it's just a piece of information that he needs to know, I say FYI. I don't say sir, I don't say anything, FYI. And no regards, nothing. Yes, he knows I respect him, but then FYI, just a piece of information. And if I want him to respond, I say please respond or please acknowledge, and he says okay. So these short forms of communication are slowly becoming more and more acceptable in more advanced organizations like IIT Kharagpur. I'm sure the similar things are happening even in IIMs, where we are saving time by cutting out these formalities. Yes, the boss wants to know, needs to know FYI, and just copy and paste the information. So that is an inside marker. Again, how you address things, what you do, these things help with immediacy. These things help with bonding. I will be able to do it with my boss in my department, but when I'm sending the same note to another senior professor in another department, the letter would be a little more formal, and I'm sure my senior faculty members may say, no, you can do that with us also, thank you very much. But if I don't do that, that is because I feel a little hesitant, because outside the department it's a different ball game. You feel a little more formal with people. You're not communicating with on a daily basis. Okay, so that is inside markers. Support, again, people minimize power differences by offering support. They come to the same level, they say I'll help you. And coaching, which is what we just talked about, it helps people bond with each other. Now, and the purpose of minimizing power differences is to get people to encourage people to talk, to encourage people to express themselves, to encourage people to work well with each other and to get out of their shells and share positive energy. When there is too much of laxity, when people are just not completing their goals, then what happens is people start feeling the need for controlling and regulating the situation, and at that point we need to start bringing in some vertical structure into the organization. So you try and maximize power differences. We talked about power distance in the class on intercultural communication. That is what we are doing here in order to regulate the organization. You monitor people's performance. It is monitored, but then that becomes more and more obvious. You say, well, I expected you to do something, it hasn't been done. Why? Why has it not been completed? Or face threatening acts. Face indicates public image. So, you know, if people are not behaving or people are not doing what they're expected to do, people may end up criticizing and rebuking them in public to indicate how far ahead they are of their subordinates. Competitive conflict is another way by which power differences are maximized. Interruptions and non-supportive statements, again, subordinate is trying to do their job, boss calls the subordinate to his or her office and keeps interrupting, calls the subordinate to his office for 3 hours, doesn't give any work, keeps interrupting, okay, have tea, attends to phone calls, attends to other people. This person is sitting there with something that would have been over in 5 minutes, but then just sort of impressing on the person that, you know, your work isn't as important. And checking and micromanaging can create competitive conflict, and that can maximize power differences. And power games, which is something we all see, you know, how people express that they have more power over others. Again, we will talk about this when we talk about persuasion and leadership. We'll discuss this a lot more then, but just to give you an idea. Okay, communication activities, subordinate to senior. We talked about what the subordinate can say to the what the senior can say to the subordinate. Now, subordinate to senior, upward influence, Pell's effect. This is something we talked about in one of the previous lectures also. Subordinates would initiate more upward messages if they believed their superiors had upward influence. Again, this could be open persuasion, strategic persuasion, or manipulation. You openly say, boss, you are connected to your boss, so I am openly talking to you, or strategically managing this, or manipulation, which is a negative form of strategic persuasion. Again, we'll discuss this more when we talk about the persuasion in an organization. Women and the superior subordinate communication. Now, this is a subject, a topic that's very close to my heart because I've seen this. Being a woman in a hierarchical organization, it is very difficult for women in senior positions to, one has to be very cautious while dealing with people of the other gender. Whether you're a woman in a senior position with male subordinates, or you're a woman, you're a male in a senior position with female subordinates, the gender interactions can create a lot of misunderstandings. The interpretations of gender interactions can create a lot of misunderstandings, so please be cautious. One tip that I learned from my seniors that I've been using is, whenever talking to especially a subordinate of the opposite gender, keep your doors open, even if you are saying something negative. That is something that has helped me quite a bit. Male students, again, you don't know how others will interpret. You and the subordinate are on the same level, you know, you respect each other, but because of this male-female interaction going on, why risk misinterpretations? Keep your doors open, have negative interactions in public places. That usually helps protect yourself and the other person also. So that is one tip that I'm sharing. I hope I'm not politically incorrect. I hope I'm not saying something I shouldn't, but that is one way to keep yourself safe. Okay. Principles of developing work relationships. The some principles that we use to develop work relationships are one is proxemics, or closeness affects relationship development. The second one is relationship communication conveys information and imposes behavior. You get into a relationship, we start expecting things from people we are in touch with. The third principle here is relationships can be symmetrical or complementary. We've talked about this earlier. Each partner will have different interpersonal needs. Again, we've discussed this, and co-workers can have more control over each other than can supervisors. Okay, some stages in the development of personal relationships at work. How do personal relationships develop at work? The first transition is from an acquaintance to friend. I know you, and then slowly we start coming on the same level. We've talked about this when we talked about the stages in group formation. The second transition is friend to close friend. I know you more. We start being seen as a team. The third transition is close friend to best friend, and occasionally the fourth transition occurs where best friend becomes an intimate friend, or there's some romantic relationship that develops. Okay, factors in the development of personal relationships, things that affect the development of professional relationships. Proxemics is again one, out of sight, out of mind. You meet people, it is inevitable that you will become friends, that you will develop professional relationships. It helps in the development of professional relationships if you are in touch. It doesn't have to be physical closeness, but as long as you are exchanging emails, talking to each other, just acknowledging each other's existence, that helps in the development of professional relationships, working relationships as well as friendships. Treatment of subordinates by superiors. Again, treatment perceived as unfavorable leads to increasing communication and physical gap. You start avoiding each other, and that sort of becomes a dysfunctional kind of relationship. We've talked about social exchange theory in a previous lecture, so I'm not going to or probably we've not. Social interactions are regulated by each person's desire to derive the maximum pleasure and minimum pain from the other person. If your behavior is rewarded, if it gets positive reinforcement from the environment, you will respond in the same manner. If your behavior gets reinforced negatively, you will not repeat the same behavior. If somebody gives you negative feedback, the behavior will not be repeated, and that in turn affects how you develop relationships at work. You're nice to somebody, you do your work, you're patted on the back, you'll repeat that same good work. You do your work well, the boss doesn't acknowledge it, it will cause a break in the communication and in your relationship with the boss. Positive consequences of work relationships. What happens when you form relationships at work? The positive things that happen because of work relationships are, first is professional and personal support system. We create this very, very thick network, very, very strong network of professional and personal friendships or relationships. Anytime you make a mistake, the profession, the team will support you. They'll help you get out of the negative impacts of or they'll help you bear the consequences of that mistake. So that is one thing that happens when we bond with each other, when we integrate into a team. The second one is professional network, which in turn aids our promotions, it aids our progress in the organization, it aids our jump to a new organization. Again, this is done by friendships, your golf outings with your bosses, and the dinners, where late night dinners with, Christmas parties, all of that stuff. Loyalty towards the organization, respect, again, all these relationships. And of course, you see people in other places, you see people in outside of the work environment, and you see people doing different things, and slowly our opinions are sort of solidified or changed or whatever. So respect, again, it develops because we see people repeating the same positive behaviors, and the respect grows, and we sort of start acknowledging and accepting each other's presence in the group. Professional growth, again, one more very important consequence of work relationship. What happens when professional relationships don't pan out the way they were supposed to? Some problems that we face. Role and role dynamics, again problems because of role and role dynamics. One is role ambiguity, which occurs when a person is uncertain about his or her role. You don't know what is expected of you, so you get confused, and that can lead to problems with your peers. You don't know where you stand in the team. You can be hesitant to speak to your peers, and that can create problems within the team or with your boss. Role overload occurs when too much is expected and the individual feels overwhelmed with work. Again, that is another thing that can go wrong in the organization. Role underload occurs when too little is expected. You don't know, you feel you are capable of doing so much more, and you are not given the work, the amount of work, the quality of work that you feel you can do, the amount of responsibility that you feel you can take on, and that is role underload, and that can again create problems in your relationships with your peers and superiors and subordinates. Role conflict occurs when a person is unable to meet the expectations of others. We were talking about why we conform to group pressure. The group exerts some sort of pressure on us, where we have social facilitation, people help us grow. We have social comparison theory, where we compare what we are thinking, our perceptions of what we are expected to do, with others' perceptions of what we are expected to do, and if they don't match, then role conflict occurs when a person is unable to meet the expectations of others, and that can create problems. Okay, some forms of role conflict. We have intra-sender role conflict, which occurs when the same person sends conflicting expectations. One day your boss says, I expect you to take on so much responsibility, and the next day the boss takes away that responsibility, gives it to somebody else and says you're good for nothing. So you don't know where you stand. You say, what happened? And the boss says, no, somebody else volunteered to take that on, and that person is senior. So I thought that it would be better in the long run. And you say, what did I do? Where did I go wrong? One day you are trusting me with so much of work, the next day you have taken all that and given it to somebody else. One day you are asking me about my welfare, the next day when I say good morning or good evening, you don't even look at me. So you get, it's confusing. That is the intra-sender role conflict. The boss apparently or the superior does not know what they expect of you. Inter-sender role conflict occurs when different people signal conflicting and mutually exclusive expectations. For example, in an organization, one person says that you are expected to do this, another peer says, no, you go into a new organization, somebody else gives you some information, somebody else gives you some other information, and we sort of get confused. Person role conflict occurs when one's personal values and needs come into conflict with role expectations. Again, when we join an organization, we are told that your work time will be 10 to 6. Some days you will be expected to stay back late. You say some days, 1 day in a week, 2 days in a week. What ends up happening is you end up going to the office at 8 o'clock every single morning. You end up coming back from the office at 11 p.m. every single night, and you end up working on all Saturdays and part of Sundays on every single weekend. And so you feel, no, this is not what I had bargained for. Yes, I'm committed to my work, but this is just stretching me too thin. So, where do we draw the line? And that can create problems with our roles. Am I being a good homemaker? Am I looking after my family well? Am I being a good parent? Am I being a good daughter? Am I being a good son? Am I being and also being a good worker? Or where does one draw the line between these two hats that one is wearing? Okay, strains that are caused by work. The first one is management of information. What and how much should be shared with who and when? Where should we draw the line? Perceived need for consensus. What should be agreed upon while communicating with who and when and why? Where do we come to a consensus, and why should we come to a consensus, and where do we say, no, that's enough, I put my foot down? Acceptance. Who should one feel the need to be accepted by, and when and why? Who should we feel, who should we look forward to for acceptance? Do I need to keep all my peers happy? Do I need to keep my boss happy all the time? Do I need to keep my boss and his bosses and their bosses happy all the time? Or do I need to keep my family happy all the time? Where does this role end? In my position, do I need to keep all my students happy? Do I always have to bow down to their whims? Or do I need to keep my boss happy, who says that you need to discipline the students? So where does one fit in? Public display of friendships and relationships. Who should know about which friendship and when and why? And again, male female friendships, even platonic friendships, need to be dealt with care because of the way intergender relationships are seen in high context cultures, and even intragender relationships these days. Depending on how close you feel to somebody, what level your friendship is at, and how you express that friendship needs to be treated very, very cautiously, especially in public. So, to avoid misinterpretation. Again, friendships are good, but just be cautious about how you deal with them in public, because your verbal and non-verbal signals can be majorly misinterpreted and maybe used against you when you least expect them to be used against you. So, just be careful. Strains caused by friendship at work. Friendship at work can cause some strains on on your efficiency. One is objectivity, which is loyalty towards your work vis-a-vis the organization or team and or department. Where do you draw the line? Do you support your friend when they are wrong all the time, or do you stab them in the back in the name of being objective and being professional all the time? So, how do you use this? Your friend may confide in you at some point about their vulnerability, and you go into a meeting and you speak up about their vulnerability and you point it out to them and you say, well, you told me this, why has this not been done till now? Nobody else knows it, you have been told about it, and then you defend yourself and say that I was just being professional. So is that loyalty to the organization, or is it loyalty to your work, or is it professionalism, or is it neither? You have to draw the line, but that is a strain that is caused on a person by virtue of being friends at work. Work-related inequality versus egalitarianism between friends. Again, we know that at many levels there's competition in an organization, and at times one of the set of friends is chosen for a higher remuneration or a higher positive reinforcement than others. At that point, there is some stress that is caused on the friendship and even in the organization, because your interpersonal relationships may get spoiled because you keep wondering why that person was chosen and you were not, unless the reasons for this choice are very clear. Performance at work versus socialization at work. How many cups of tea do you have together at work? How much time do you spend talking to each other at work, and how much time do you actually spend working at work? So, managing official information, again, very, very dicey subject. Managing official information is all about, do you give your friends the inside scoop on things, or do you keep confidential things confidential? Some negative consequences of work relationships. Misuse of support is one. Support is a commodity. Strings are attached for future reference. I offer you support because I want you to support me, or I want to get something from you later on. Information retrieval through one-way communication. Again, we are friends, you give me the information, but again, people misuse the support. They'll take the information from you, but when you need the information or support, they will not give it to you. Codependency can result in barriers to growth or change. We are all averse to change. Most of us, as we grow older, we start becoming more and more rooted where we are, in the place we are, in the organization we are, and we don't want to move on. And if we have friends there, then it becomes more difficult to accept and explore new opportunities and take risks. Threat to personal interests, again, sharing of information, because one feels obligated to do it even if it's not in one's interest, because you're friends with somebody. So that can be one problem. Some things that co-workers say to encourage peers to leave their peers voluntarily if there's too much negativity going on. Be careful if you hear any of these things, it can create problems for you. Negatively criticize the peer, you're not doing a good job. Encourage the peer to consider a new job or career. Always, those things are coming at you. negatively criticize the peer's job, company or management, praise other jobs or careers, encourage self-evaluation. They'll say, look at yourself, what are you doing? You pour your heart out to your friends or peers, and they say, why don't you look at yourself? That might encourage you to leave voluntarily. Inform the peer of other job opportunities again and again. Warn the peer of negative consequences or outcomes. Review beliefs about work and life, and get all philosophical. Tell or encourage the peer to exit. Praise the choice of voluntary exit or resignation to the peer's behavior and negativity, and you say, well, yeah, you're facing these consequences because you deserve them. Or start praising the peer's positive qualities even when the situation doesn't warrant that. So just be cautious. If you see any of these markers, then be careful and watch out. You don't know what is coming at you if you're really expecting something negative. Okay. Some specific concerns for global teams with negative relationships at work: culture, geographic diversity, language problems and technology can all contribute to and can all be instrumental in negative relationships at work. Some challenges posed by demographic fault lines on team performance. Fault lines are, this is a metaphor used from seismology, earthquakes, and fault lines are the places where the earth is weakest, the surface of the earth is weakest, and anytime there's a disturbance in the deeper core of the earth, the fault lines are the places where that tends to move. And this is what happens in relationships. When we talk about geographic fault lines, what about your geographical background is do you feel most sensitive about, and that could in turn sort of affect how you feel about your membership in a particular group. Strong fault line group is members identify more with their subgroups and teams. Again, every group has subgroups and every subgroup has more subgroups, subgroups. So if you identify more with your subgroups than a team, there will be more conflict, less sense of safety, less team satisfaction. If you have a weak fault line group, the members identify more with teams than subgroups. So you have less of conflict, more sense of safety and more team satisfaction. How do you strengthen work relationships? Provide positive feedback, mediate conflict, discuss communication, meta communication, communicating about communication, get philosophical, help manage relationships. Don't have your closest friends outside of work. Absolutely no intimate friendships or relationships at work. Understand the difference in perceptions regarding man-woman friendships at work. I just told you that. Some criteria for healthy work relationships: individual excellence. Again, this has been given by Cantor 1997. In Modaf and Devine 2002. Individual excellence, importance for organization, interdependence, investment, information, integration, institutionalization of the organization and integrity towards the organization. This is the last slide in today's presentation. Some characteristics of high performance teams as regards communication given by Dr. Carl Larson and Dr. Frank Lefasto. In Modaf in Devine. Clear elevating goals. You have clear goals, you have a results driven structure, you have competent team members, you have a unified commitment, you have a collaborative climate, you have standards of excellence and external support and recognition and principled leadership. Again, all these are pretty self-explanatory, so I am not going to get into it. What I would like you to discuss is on this slide. I have been given the time ending signal, so I am going to stop here. Please pause at this. Discuss these things amongst yourselves, and we'll come back next time and discuss persuasion. Thank you.